In the middle of Michigan's Lower Peninsula, on a dirt stretch of old US 27 near Harrison, travelers once met a sight straight out of folklore. An old man in fringed buckskin, white hair flowing past his shoulders, and a long, snowy beard, stood outside a log cabin with a black bear by his side. His name was John Spikehorn Meyer, and in the 1930s he turned his homestead into one of Michigan's first roadside wildlife parks. To countless families heading up north, Spikehorn's Bear Den was a must-stop adventure. Spikehorn was born in 1870 and lived many lives before the bear camp. He had been a lumberjack, a miner, even an inventor, a true jack of all trades. But nothing sparked his imagination like the bears. Around 1930, as he neared 60, Spikehorn adopted an orphaned bear cub and raised it by hand. One cub led to another. Before long, he had more than 20 bears roaming his property. Rather than fear them, Spikehorn treated these black bears like family pets. He slept in his rustic cabin beside them, fed them treats, and gave each one a name. In 1931, with Michigan's new highway bringing cars past his door, Spikehorn sensed opportunity. He opened Spikehorn's Bear Den and Deer Park at the corner of US 27 and M61, a simple log roadside stop that would become legendary. Visitors gasped as they realized the bears here weren't behind bars. They wandered freely. Spikehorn would chuckle and hand out day-old bread, candy, and popcorn so guests could feed the bears right from their palms. Children squealed as bears lapped sweet soda pop from glass bottles, fizzing and dribbling just like messy toddlers. For a generation of Michiganders, the fear and fascination of getting this close to a live bear became an unforgettable memory. No one left Spikehorn's camp without a story to tell. Some even shook hands with the bears, literally. A hand-painted sign at the entrance proudly declared, "Only Bear Den in the world that visitors are allowed to shake hands with bear." And many did, adults and kids alike. Spikehorn would grin as a 5-foot bear stood up on its hind legs and offered a paw to a nervous guest. Moments later, laughter and applause broke out. Another handshake successful. Of course, it didn't always go so smoothly. Now and then, a bear reminded everyone it was still a wild animal. Chuckling softly. A nip here, a scratch there, even a few bites that sent tourists home with bandaged arms. It was risky, outrageous, and utterly unique. Yet, in an era before lawsuits and liability waivers, people lined up for the thrill. Helping Spikehorn spin this wild frontier experience was his friend, a showman known as Chief Red Eagle. Red Eagle was not a Native American by birth, but he dressed the part in a feathered headdress, beaded buckskins, and gold earrings. Together, the white-bearded woodsman and his charismatic partner captivated visitors with tall tales of life in Michigan's wild woods. As campfires crackled in the evening, Spikehorn's voice would rise and fall in lively yarns, stories of wrestling bear cubs or chasing poachers through pine forests. Red Eagle played along, adding drama and whoops of laughter. Young and old sat spellbound, the dark trees around them stirring with imagination. In those moments, Harrison, Michigan felt like the untamed frontier of an earlier century. Not everyone was charmed. State conservation officers, today's DNR, saw trouble brewing at Spikehorn's camp. They worried about public safety and the ethics of keeping wild bears captive. Spikehorn scoffed at their concerns. He was fiercely independent, a self-styled naturalist who believed he understood his bears better than any government official. When pressured to obtain permits and cage the animals, Spikehorn responded with defiant humor. He posted a new sign at the front gate. "Feed conservation officers to the bears." It was his cheeky way of thumbing his nose at authority. Locals roared with laughter at the sign, and it became almost as famous as the bears themselves. The feud between Spikehorn and the state raged for years. In 1937, a law forced him to pen the adult bears, so he built enclosures, then invited visitors inside the pens to keep the interactions going. When a child or a tourist occasionally got nipped, Spikehorn would shrug it off, blaming the victim's clumsiness or the game warden's meddling. To him, these woods and these creatures were his domain, and he wasn't about to back down. Through the 1940s, Spikehorn Meyer became a folk hero in Michigan. His photo appeared on Clare County maps and in newspapers across the state. Families would plan their vacation route just to stop at his place. He even made it onto newsreels and radio broadcasts, bringing a whiff of the wild to city dwellers. One famous newsreel, roaming through Michigan, captured Spikehorn greeting visitors with a bear cub cradled in his arms and a twinkle in his eye. Reporters called him the Bear Man of Michigan, and he reveled in the spotlight. He ran unsuccessfully for state office a few times in the 1940s, mainly to promote his belief in living free and untaxed, much like his untamed companions. Spikehorn knew how to use a bit of showmanship, and sometimes outright stunts, to keep people talking. If attendance dipped, a bear escape might mysteriously occur, sending locals into a frenzy until Spikehorn heroically lassoed the runaway and brought it back to the den amidst newspaper cameras. As the 1950s dawned, however, time was catching up with the old showman. Spikehorn was in his 80s but still opened the park each spring, greeting tourists from his rocking chair out front. Then, on a frigid January night in 1957, disaster struck. A spark from his wood stove ignited the log souvenir shop and museum. Flames consumed the heart of Spikehorn's camp, his keepsakes, postcards, and supplies, all gone in one winter inferno. Remarkably, Spikehorn himself and his animals survived. In the ashes of his life's work, the 86-year-old pioneer faced a choice. Friends and fans offered money to help rebuild. One woman even proposed to fund a new bear den for a hefty $60,000. Spikehorn just laughed. He quipped that her offer was just a trick to get me married, and he wasn't planning on marrying until he hit 100. Then I'd marry a rich woman and be the richest man in the cemetery. It was classic Spikehorn, irreverent, proud, unwilling to be tamed by circumstance. Against all odds, he did rebuild a smaller version of the camp and reopened later in 1957. But that fall, Spikehorn suffered a severe stroke. The man who once wrestled bears now sat quietly in a nursing home, his body failing. In September 1959, John Spikehorn Meyer passed away at age 89. He left no wife or children. The animals and the legends were his family. Without Spikehorn's outsized personality, the bear camp could not carry on. The cages rusted, the last few bears were relocated, and the property fell silent. In time, the log buildings either burned or crumbled. Today, if you drive through Harrison, you might miss what remains of Spikehorn's empire, a pair of stone chimney pillars hidden among the trees, guarding the memory of a truly unique chapter in Michigan's history. Spikehorn Meyers Bear Camp is gone, but the stories live on. In the history of Harrison, Michigan, his name still sparks a smile, and maybe a shudder, for those who remember shaking hands with a bear. This Michigan moment reminds us of a time not so long ago when a single individual's wild dream could bring people together in wonder. Spikehorn dared to blur the line between man and beast, and in doing so, he etched his legend into up-north lore.